not now.
Immaturity is an interesting concept that you've brought up there, CJ. I talked with another Delta guy, John McPhee, Sheriff of Baghdad, for people that may relate to that more. And what a wise guy. And he talks about chapters in his life, which chapter you're in. If your life is a book, if you're having a really bad time, well, how do you know you're not in like chapter 2 of 10?
Yeah.
So much more to come. But he was a sergeant major. He was angry. He was, a story he tells is, when he's in his office, some guy knocked on the door, goes to tell him something, couldn't quite get it out. And the guy and John just looked at him and said, get out, come back to me when you're ready to actually say something. An angry, pissed off guy. And he had a moment somewhere in those years, hey, do you want to be happy or do you want to be that guy? And he matured, and he was in his like 40s, 50s, and became a nice, happy guy. He chose to be happy or choose to be a dick. So chose to be happy. It's interesting what you're saying about immaturity. And where I'm leading here is, you talked about your son as a teenager. You talked about special ops guys, and you didn't mention it, but you intimated about transition because you talked about career. Why does it take so long for us to find ourselves? I would suggest that the special ops stuff was learning skills. Yes. You gave Pat as an example, replaceable. Yep, but he learned amazing skills. Then when I started teaching those skills, didn't really change much, but now he's found his calling. Yeah. So, and then you're talking about calling as a father, calling as a husband. It does seem that we are immature, and I'll humbly say that I'm 48 years old. I only found my maturity in the last couple of years. Yeah. You talked about devolution, perhaps, of the family unit, or of that maturity there. I would guess as an interviewer, I'd ask you, where is the solution? But I think you've sort of touched on it a little bit yourself.
It's an education process right now. I think that's the most important thing we can do, because this is where, like you said, in special operations, you learn skills, you learn tactics, you learn objectives, right? Isn't that the fundamental difference? We talked about male and female. Isn't that the fundamental difference between a woman's chick flick as opposed to a guy movie, right? Chick flick is about the restoration or resolution of a relationship, right? A guy movie is about a very clear objective, a problem to be solved, a clear distinction between good and evil. We win something in the end, and hopefully there's a sufficient body count, right?
Yeah.
That's a guy movie. So these are the two ways in which, you can look at the world. But the thing is that, and which is oftentimes a big problem too, because the way men and women are different. I used to say this all the time. Women are raised with their heads soaked in Harlequin romance novels. Men are raised with their heads soaked in Playboy. Yeah. They both bring unrealistic expectations to a relationship.
100%. Mark Gungor, Jess and I watch Mark Gungor quite a bit. Interesting cat, and anybody listening, jump on YouTube and go Tale of Two Brains. So it's an interesting way of looking at it. Exactly that. And that's where you were about 20 minutes ago, talking about the male and the female. If the male understood what the female was going through, had empathy, rather than being, as you said, top of the food chain, there would be a beautiful balance there, wouldn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It can be so much more than what it is. And we're still learning, with the over 50% divorce rate. Second marriage is 65% divorce rate. Third marriage is 75+% divorce rate.
Wow.
So part of, I think there was a wisdom to arranged marriages back in the past. What we're doing, I have a message series that I did for one of my old coaching groups called Romeo and Juliet versus 300, a tale of two love stories.
Yeah.
Right. Romeo and Juliet, we think, is this great love story. Women still use it. Oh, he's a real Romeo, which is interesting, the way women see things. Women see things they tend to idealize males. So they'll say he's a Romeo, tall, dark, and handsome, bad boy, friend zone. They use these terms for men, Romeo. But you'll never hear a man say she's a real Juliet.
Right.
right? A man will never, men don't idealize women, they idealize work. We're in the second quarter. You know what I mean? One more goal, we win the championship. And we use these terms for work. Two women meet each other at a dinner party. They ask each other, who do you know? Two men, what do you do? Right?
Wow. Yeah.
So the outlooks are different. But once there is that understanding, then men can say, okay, there's a lot I'm missing about relationship that I'm going to learn from her. My wife was the one who taught me everything about being a husband and all of that. I had to learn from her.
Yeah.
And women are oftentimes the biggest advocates for the family and the marriage and time away and date nights and all these sorts of things. And what can happen is we men, now that we got the we see women as an objective to win.
Of course.
And so we'll do whatever we got to do to get her. Flowers, put on the ostensible romantic persona, whatever we got to do to win her. Then once we win her, back to the default position. On the couch, buttons open on our trousers,
Yeah.
drinking the pint, watching the ball game. Right? We resign. We got it. It's been, whereas the woman thinks differently. The woman understands, again, she's not at the top of the totem pole. So her competition is not in the workplace. Her competition is with other women.
Yep.
Right. So she has to do two things. She has to keep other women away from him. And to her detriment, she has to snip his balls as quick as she possibly can. To where this brilliant soldier, who fought enemies, now has to ask permission to go play poker with his friends. They're very good at that part of it. But what all of this means is going back to the earlier point asked about, what is it about special ops guys and coming now and transitioning, actually not a word, but I always say, I've never met a noun I couldn't verb. Transitioning into this other life is the education process, which means education basically means giving someone a worldview, a philosophy, a way to look at life, which is what they actually found. It wasn't the skill so much that they loved in the special operations lifestyle. It was the larger thing in which those individual things made sense.
Yeah.
Right. So now they're out amongst the public where there isn't that same degree of iron sharpening iron. You're not surrounded by a bunch of high D type A personalities committed to excellence and competitive and all of these things. So now you've got to deal with people who are the opposite, people who are dragging ass like an alligator, right? Yeah. Slow moving, doing a piss poor job, celebrating mediocrity, walking around dressed in excuses all the time. And so you've got the pain of the past, and now you've got this to deal with. How do you find your place? Well, that's the challenge. You're going to have to make this place. I think one of the advantages for Mac was he and I coming across each other, because we joke within our little squad and stuff, which you're a part of, is because people often, well, Mac, what are you doing with this guy? What was he in the unit with you? Was he a ranger? Was he? No, I wasn't even, I was barely a Boy Scout.
How did you guys meet?
We met on Instagram.
Wow.
This was back in 2016, early 2016. So he had not blown up quite yet. He had a good following, probably 50,000 or so at the time. And I had come across, there's a backstory to that. Why he would be important to me.
Yeah.
Is I had a very long fascination with special operations, in particular, Delta Force.
Yep.
It came out of nowhere, but I always had a passion for secret type things. So, and interested in intelligence, interested in the mafia,
yeah,
interested in secret societies, conspiracy type stuff. I was always drawn to these things that were on the margin,
Different worlds.
different worlds. And so I remember in toward the end of the 80s there, when we had the Gulf War One,
Yeah.
and so that in America we were still trying to get over Vietnam. So this was a big thing for us.
I'm pretty
And
sure
it
you
was
wore the
also
same gear to Gulf War One as you did in Vietnam as well, man.
exactly. So it was the first time a war was televised 24/7.
Yeah.
And that was the birth really of cable news. It had been around for some time, but that's when it became everything, because once that war was being broadcast, the bombing raids initially in Iraq and Baghdad, all the big networks had to go back to regular programming. Only CNN could broadcast 24/7.
Right.
And so that's where that really started. But they were, as you know, Saddam was firing Scud missiles into Israel.
Yep.
And so they started to talk about this Delta Force unit who was going around with dune buggies, finding these silos, finding all of these launch things that were scattered all around the Iraqi desert.
Yep.
So I'd seen those initial pictures of them with these loaded, souped up dune buggies with 50 caliber machine guns, and these guys hanging off them, just dressed differently than other soldiers. And it immediately I was sucked in like that. I came very close, because of what was going on at the time, as every American did, to just dropping everything and joining the military.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't, though. But then just a few years later, in 1993, suddenly on the news there's been something's happened in Mogadishu.
Yeah.
And then we see these bodies being dragged through the streets. And so there again is this Delta Force. And I'm just like locked into this. And then eventually the book came out, Black Hawk Down.
Yep.
Then the movie. And so by that time, only my 3 children and another gentleman who I was very good friends with, so this would have been back in 99 or so, only those 4 human beings knew my fascination with Delta. I had the book, but the ones that were available at that time.
Yeah, I think it would have been the Charlie Beckwith's book at that time.
Yeah, Beckwith's book. Yeah, Beckwith. Then eventually Eric Haney's book came out, and so I was fascinated by these things. But I never. In fact, I keep this for proof. I have a photo album, because I got on Facebook about 2007. I have a photo album on my Facebook page. It's private now, but it's a photo album I put up in 2007, just filled with whatever pictures I could find from the internet of Delta guys. And it says Delta Force because I suffer from too much testosterone or something like that. That was the name of it. And that photo album was there, dated 2007, just as the proof that the interest had gone back that far.
Yeah.
But Mac didn't even know that. I didn't tell Mac that till a couple of years ago, when myself and his wife, Rebecca, were invited to, you know who Brad Halling is? Brad is, follow him, Brad Halling, on Instagram. He's got more pictures and testimony about the Battle of Mogadishu than just about anybody does.
Wow.
So he was one of his dear friends, his close friends that he actually bunked with in Mogadishu was Gary Gordon.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So him and Gary have been longtime friends.
Yeah.
So he was in the same he was in the chopper with Gordon and Schuchart when they were dropped off to go guard the chopper.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's powerful. That's something that would be very hard to unwind out of his brain.
Yeah. So a RPG had hit that Black Hawk later, and he had lost his bottom part of his right leg. That, but still fought while his leg was removed, hanging on by a tendon. He still fought
10 times, 10 times,
10 times more, brother, 10 times more. And the anyway, he had started following my Instagram through Mac, and his wife is a colonel, full board colonel in the Army. Awesome people. And so they invited us over one evening to for dinner. And so I went to their house. We had a great, great time. And he is also, and he's back to building a distillery now, but he's an expert in spirits, expert in bourbons and whiskeys and the like. So we go to his house and it is filled. Every room is filled with bottles. I've
Wow.
never seen so much alcohol in my life.
Wow.
So we go into his front room. It's just like a sitting type of smoking, drinking room. And he's telling us these stories about what happened that day in Mogadishu. And he brings out this bottle, 25-year-old bottle. It was the 25th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu. And so he brings it out and tells us the story. And he says, I kept this for 25 years so I could open it to serve to my mates who were also there. So we drank out of this bottle. He goes, and I want to share it with you.
Wow. Powerful.
And you get that. I don't need to be here. All I wanted to do was graciously excuse myself. I'll go to the other room and pet the dog or something, but you guys drink this. Of course, they were not going to have that at all. Incredibly respectful guys. And so I had this drink. So, but in that moment, I said, this is the place to make my confession. And that's when I told Mac and Brad my secret, long-standing love of the unit and those who are in it. And that was the reason why I found him originally. Otherwise, I wouldn't care. He's just another badass on Instagram.
Do you
No,
know a
it was
funny story?
because what it was.
I'll tell you a quick funny story. You know, there's the subscription boxes you get. You pay $100 and every month they send you something.
Yeah.
Well, funny, I had Brandon Webb on at Navy SEAL. He owns is the boss of softrep.com, big media company. Had him on the other day. It'll come out soon. But he used to own Crate Club, and Crate Club would be something all these special ops guys got together. And I think I got it. I think I got it sent to here in Australia, and I think I got like an axe, which was really cool. A couple other things I couldn't really use, and there was a video, and it was carbine skills, and it had this redneck dude on it, and just standing there, and I thought, and I've had it for years, and I never, because I haven't got on the gun for a while, and I tossed it like about a year ago. I was just going, I was really brutal trying to minimize things. And 3 months later, I found Pat Mack, went, was that the guy? And it was his DVD. I couldn't believe it.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, that's my little story about how I first heard of Pat McNamara, and then moved on to find him on Insta. But obviously your calling, man, I think is to be linked up together there. You know, I wanted this podcast to be about your journey, and it is about your journey, but
Yeah.
you know, it's like
he's a big part of my life right now.
Yeah,
he's a huge part.
Symbiotic, it seems, as well.
Yeah, very much so. You know, we call it apostolic mantle, which I won't go into the definition of why those terms, but it's very similar idea to what the mythologist scholar Joseph Campbell used to say about following your bliss. And he would say, if you follow your bliss, which is the deep center of who you are, what you're passionate about, if you follow that, he said, then doors will open, which would have never opened before. And people will be brought into your life, which would never have been brought in before, just because you're following your bliss. There's this providence, this hand, visible hand, almost putting things together, and it's painfully seen. So Mac and I have seen this repeatedly ever since we got together. And so in our little vlogs and things, I think it was recorded once, but things just happen. We go to do something we think is going to be nondescript, and all of a sudden this person shows up, and that happens, and this happens, and all of a sudden it comes together perfectly, and we're like, apostolic mantle. It would not have happened if the both of us weren't working together, and for some reason you get that divine assistance, if you will, kind of we can only, I always tell people, it's like walking by a lantern. You can only see so much in front of you. So we don't know we don't know what's the long term, what you guys are going to do. I don't know. We're just being faithful to the present. We just want to maximize all that we are and all that we can do for a greater purpose than ourselves. That's all we want to do. And we believe that by doing that and avoiding the temptation to create a 5-year plan, because
Yeah.
Mac wasn't a part of my 5-year plan. People say, what's your future plan? 2 words: seize opportunities. That's it. But I'm not trying to get to a point in the future. I'm not linear. No, I'm maximizing my abilities, my interests. I work out life. I say my life is like a party favor. You blow the little thing and it rolls out.
Yeah.
Life is working out. It's working itself out because I'm being faithful to always prepare myself. Always, we used to say in the church, you're never out of the will of God, preparing to do the will of God. Right. So you're always teaching, training, preparing yourself, meditating, working, creating, developing, envisioning. You're constantly developing, and by doing so, you're always given new sunglasses through which to look. Right. And then I tell people all the time, well, how do I get my thing going on the internet? How do I become an influencer? Well, there's a lot of techniques that you can use, but the most important thing is get out there and start kicking the shit out of everything. I'd rather have you out there posting 50 times a day and me have to reel you back in, because again, I'm a marketing consultant, me to have to reel you back in and say, whoa, that's a little bit too much. I'd rather that person than the one who's like, I'm not sure, or I'm just posting once a week because I don't want to trouble anybody. No. If you believe in something, you'll sell it. If you believe in your kids, you will sell me your kids. If I get you talking about your kids, you're going to go on and on and on and on and on, as if you're selling them. You'll sell what you believe in. So if you're not selling yourself, then you obviously don't believe in yourself. So you've got to be sure about that. And in Mac and I's case, that's how we approach it. We just work a lot together. But anyway, once I found him in 2016, it happened because I'd seen him first in a BCM little promo on YouTube.
Right.
And it was him just at the range, but it was put to heavy metal music. And I said, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then he finishes by going, get you some. And I said, that guy's got to be heavy metal. Got to be. So I found him on Instagram. And so I started following him. And then one day he posts this little video clip, because he used to travel all the time, teaching courses all over the country. And so he would get a rent-a-car. And oftentimes when he would get a rent-a-car, he would get one of the sports cars, muscle cars, right? And so he would go off, because oftentimes the ranges were out in some obscure location where there wasn't a lot of traffic, country roads and whatever. Yeah. So he would get out there and he would start burning the tires, smoking the tires. But so he did it, filming himself doing it. And there was a heavy metal band playing, Soulfly. And I just wrote, it's good to see someone motivated by metal. But my handle is Metal Motivator. Yeah. So again, he didn't have as many people commenting at the time. So he looked down at this handle. And so he loves heavy metal. So he looked down and he saw, good to see somebody motivated by metal. And this guy's name is the Metal Motivator. And so Mac said, I just said, follow. So Mac followed back. And so that's what started us commenting on each other's posts. And so at the time I was in Texas and he's in North Carolina. So, but I had a home here. And so I told him, I said, listen, man, in this upcoming year, 2017, I'm moving back to North Carolina. He says, right on. He said, hit me up when you get here. So I eventually hit him up, got out there, met with him one time, him and his wife at the pub, came out a couple months later to meet him again. And by then I was going to start my own podcast called Metal Excellence for my metal motivation community, which is self-improvement for people who love hard rock and heavy metal.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like Tony Robbins meets Metallica. So that's the kind of the vibe, right? Daily metal motivation, daily screams for living aggressively.
Hey, while we're there, CJ, while we're there,
yeah,
I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna split this into two, but right on that, because people are listening. What is your main website?
metalmotivation.com.
Boom. And I was stunned because I knew you as CJ Ortiz. I knew
Yeah.
CJ. I didn't know about metalmotivation.com. And when I jumped on your page, I was stunned. So let's go back to that. He's seen Metal Motivator. That's what you do.
Yeah. So I go out there a second time to visit with him and Rebecca. And by then I was going to start a podcast called Metal Excellence. And it was about excellence, meaning do things with a spirit of excellence. Or as I say in Metal Motivation, I finish all my videos with this phrase. And remember, whatever you do, don't suck. Metal up. Right. So I wanted to do something called Metal Excellence, about doing your best and all that sort of thing. So I said, you know what, dude, you should be my first guest. And he said, hell yeah. So I go out to his house and we do the first podcast. It was great. This was 2017, end of 2017. And then after that first one, it went really well. We went to the pub afterwards. And we sat down at the Growler Shop, which is another kind of pub. And Matt goes in to get us a couple of pints. And he comes out to the table and he says, somebody's going to be joining us. And I said, okay, it's Mac's town. So I'm sure he's got friends everywhere. Yeah. I said, is this a friend of yours? He goes, no, I've never met him. So, okay. So why is he joining us? He said, he's a young Green Beret and he recognized me from Instagram. And I said, come out, meet my buddy. So he comes out and joins us. So we're talking, and I'm talking about this podcast.
Yeah.
And so Mac and I are going back and forth. And it's just, I mean, just boom, 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 strike and ignite, strike and ignite, strike and ignite. It's just sparks flying between us. And the Green Beret goes, I tell you what, if what I just heard between you two is what this podcast is like, this thing is going to crush. So we were just telling, all excited about, whatever we were talking about. And so I said, Mac, you should co-host this. He goes, hell yeah. So he starts co-hosting. Well, you bring Mac on to whatever you're doing and you get everybody who's following Mac as well, right? Because they're interested in everything he's doing. So all of a sudden now we start to get all of these people that are listening to Metal Excellence who have nothing to do with metal motivation. They don't necessarily listen to heavy metal or anything. They're just there for Mac.
Yeah.
So at some point I said, you know what, Mac, I think we should change the name. And he said, yeah, you know what, you may be right. And so I said, here's my suggestion. I said, I have a name of something that I've used for years, and it's based on a quote that I use that says, to be a badass, you have to kick ass. And the first ass you need to kick is your own. So I call it a University of Badassery. He says, I like that. So it became the University of Badassery. And then once we did that, then it really started to grow.
Yep.
But in this process, then he and I are getting to know each other intimately, And Mac, I remember getting hit up by an old mate of his from the unit, George Hannell, if you know George.
I've heard of him,
but
a ton with SoftRep, and I do actually want to look at connect with him because he does sound like he's got some pretty cool stories.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Brothers of the Cloth recently. Yep. It's a great story about you.
I did hear that.
Yeah, about unit guys. But anyway, so he hits me up because him and Mac were best friends. And he hits me up on Facebook in my inbox and he says, listen, he says, I know my friend Mac. I know how he looks at people. I know how it's difficult to gain his trust, etc. So you must be something special for him to allow you this close. And I said, well, I never really got that vibe from him, because we were joined by the mutual love of heavy metal. And then we had this similar mindset. So that's where the idea came out of, where I started when people would ask about our history, why are you guys together? I said, listen, I'm a tier 1 civilian. That's why this works.
Yeah.
Because if you were to watch my life, it's all about that. It's a multiplicity of talents, skills. It's a commitment to excellence. I train every day. My diet is strict as hell, stricter than Max. You can wash your clothes on my stomach. I'm 55 years old. I train hard, right? And so I get the dog and I train the dog. I train it. So that's tier 1, 10 times more way of thinking. So he would never tolerate somebody like me that close to him, working with him, that maybe did a few things well, but was 50 pounds overweight. You know what I mean?
Oh, hell
Or
yeah.
was down in the mouth or needed to be picked up, somebody that he had to encourage. No, I'm on his ass like plastic wrap about everything, because I'm a creative force
Yeah.
for this relationship. And he doesn't have to tell me or ask me to do anything. So we're business partners. But one day there was a break. There was this opportunity, because before we started to really get more business oriented, he had this conversation with me at the pub, and he was talking about how someone screwed him one time.
Right.
And he's going into detail about the story. And Mac's like ADD. Okay. So your conversations with him are brief because he jumps, he turns and jumps subject.
Apparently I do the same damn thing, but it seems right in my head. So I say, I talk fast, so you better listen fast.
You better listen. Exactly. That's how Mac is. So if Mac takes his time saying anything, there's a reason. So he's telling me this extensive story about this guy burning him. And I say, why do I feel like you're telling me this story for a reason? He said, because I am. So what was happening, in other words, the betrothal period was happening. The dating was getting more serious, if you want to put it that way. So he was letting me closer, and he was like, but here's the warning. I've been burned before. But then one day we're at the pub and there's a bunch of people around us. We're just having a great time, raging like Jamaicans, man. And he just turns to me. He just says out loud, he goes, CJ. I go, yep. He said, you're my friend. That was it. And so he'll still mention to this day. He goes, you remember when I said that was it? That was the will you marry me? That was the, in other words, from here on out, bro, I'm an open book. You know what I mean? I trust you with my family. I trust you with my vehicles. I trust you with my very name. I have access to his social accounts. I could go in there and shut his Instagram down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because sometimes he can't get to post something, or I'll post his stories for him so I can make, because he can't write marketing ad copy for his life. I'll create the ebooks that help build his email list and do all these things. We're business partners now. But it took from 2016. I mean, I was telling him about creating the squad 2 years before we did it last year.
Wow. Now just we've touched on the squad twice, and we're into the second half of the show. So people listening, I love it. It's a Patreon subscribed group, tiered, and is the squad. Maybe just quickly elaborate on how people can look into that, because it's been cool for me, and I'm pretty discerning, man.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I mean, it's an honor for us to have you. Outside of you, I'd only met one SAS guy, and that was an English guy who was, with the training with the unit here in the States. And so, always to tell this, there's this dark-haired, handsome, well-built guy walking around all the time, speaking in a British accent. It's like, I said, Mac, was he SAS? He was, yeah. Like a dead giveaway. In that town, I could throw a rock and hit somebody in special forces. And so it's an honor for us. I can't tell you, Damien, to have you with us. And as you can see, it is a community.
It really is. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. And so Mac and I say, listen, Mac says, we're just moderators. We're not, the coaching can happen in between squad members, and these are serious people. I saw the other day this one squad member posting himself, the captain about to fly a Southwest airline that's all painted in the American flag, and he's just, getting on board.
Yeah.
And here's another guy, who's posting a video. He's a orthopedic surgeon. And here's this other
Yes.
guy who's an eye doctor. This other one who's a chiropractor. This other one, two others who are psychologists and therapists and business owners, and we have some from inside existing government. We don't want to reveal necessarily their job, but they work, in special type services. Paramedics, first responders, fire, lots of police, detectives, all of that are in the squad. All of them could run their own squads, right? And so it's this very strange thing, because there's other people who do other things. There's other influencers. I mean, you probably talk to a lot of them on the podcast and things, or follow them on social media. This it's different. And I think it's different because Mac and I are a little different. And when I say different, I don't mean special. I mean, we're about 5 minutes out of high school. So there's this very playful, don't take yourself too seriously side to things. I mean, I always tell people, I have no middle area. There's no melancholy. There's no gray. I'm either deadly serious or we're at the pub. One of the two. You know what I mean? There's no in between. And I can switch from one to the other. I can get into a serious conversation at the pub, and it's going to be passionate. It's going to be, I'm going to feel what the message is.
I'll tell you what it is, CJ, is sorry, for me, I won't speak for anybody else, but, and probably for Jess, it's value. We're busy. I'm busy. I've never, ever been on a YouTube live stream until you guys, and you guys add value. And then we jumped on Ask a Question, and we asked a question for Jess, and she's a high level athlete and so on. And you gave value, both of you together, and all the times we've asked questions, and that ability to get that value from you guys as a team is brilliant. I'm trying to think of the correct words will do it justice, but all I can say is I'm busy. I got like 3 jobs, raising the kids, trying to do the right thing as a partner. And you guys have added value to our lives. And anybody listening, the squad, it is brilliant.
It's amazing people. I think, obviously without Mac, this doesn't, I've had my own groups for my mental motivation stuff, nothing like this. So this is obviously, the Mac, the role that Mac plays in this. But I'll often tell people, I say, I know when you see him online, you think, well, this guy just chews concrete and spits nails all day long, but he's as much a big kid as you or I are. And we have the funnest, half of our conversation is not made up of lines from movies and TV and all that sort of thing. He's great sense of humor. But what people don't often miss is how gracious, how generous, and how humble he is. I'll give you the perfect example, because my biggest supporter in all of this is Mac. My biggest cheerleader is Mac. I'll give you a couple examples. One is when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yep.
Right. So you don't get on any bigger show than that. Right. No. That's the biggest podcast in the world. So this is how the podcast opens, because I had given Mac a University of Badassery shirt. I said, give this to Joe, So the Joe's podcast opens, and this is what Joe says. He says, all right, we're live. Pat Mac, president of the University of Badassery. And Mac says, I'm more like the vice president.
Yeah, man.
And Joe goes, well, who's the president? I mean, not realizing that being president or vice president in the University of Badassery is the equivalent to having rank in the unit.
Yeah.
Doesn't really mean much.
Yeah.
So, but he goes, who's the president? He goes, that would be my buddy, CJ. And then they go into their conversation.
That's cool, man. That's really cool.
He clarified that. he didn't have to, you know what I mean? He clarified that. And then he was on Jocko's podcast.
Yep.
So he's at the very end of Jocko's podcast. Jocko says, "Hey man, plug your stuff, you do a podcast." He goes, "Yeah, I do University of Badassery podcast with my buddy CJ." And Jocko goes, "Yeah, the long hair." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "He used to be a preacher." And Jocko's like, "Okay." He goes, "CJ makes religion cool." And then Jocko goes, "But he's a metalhead, right?" And Matt goes, "Yeah, it works great. He's got the gift of gab, man. The guy's got the gift of gab." He goes, "We talk like schoolgirls." And then they go on, whatever. So in any opportunity he has in some of the biggest platforms, he's always faithful. I know that my name and my reputation is always safe with him, especially when I'm not there.
Yeah. You guys are
That's
synergistic,
integrity.
CJ. You guys are absolutely synergistic. When I reached out to you to come on the show, I'd like to think I find a different angle with things. I'm sure I do with Mac, which is why it was such a popular show. And I wanted to find about your journey. And as we're organically going through this, we've got your journey, but really it's coming into your and I mean you're with CJ and you're with Pat, your calling in that realm. And it is
Yeah,
symbiotic,
and this is
it doesn't make you less or more.
right. No, because this is, I think I posted a clip of one of our little mini vlogs.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not used to being behind the camera because I've been doing my stuff for so long, but how could I do otherwise in this instance? I know what has to be done, and what has to be done is the eyes are primarily on him. And part of my role is, because what's happening is he's done very well just by himself. But by looking at his Instagram and YouTube, you're seeing but a fraction of the man.
Yeah.
My job is to bring out the rest of it, to get him in long form conversation and highlighting it, but putting it together in a way that's funny, informative, inspirational. So this is where all of the elements, my preacher background, to be able to talk with him, the marketing background, the design background, the writing all of this comes together now in something that I wish I could take credit for saying I created. It's like we saw the opportunity and we went for it. But so much of the time was spent me knocking on his door, telling him we should do this, we should do this. Like I said, I took 2 years talking about the squad.
Yeah.
It wasn't called. I said, we need to do an online coaching thing. We need to do an online coaching thing. I've done them before. I think you would be really successful at it. 2 years. And the only reason why we started was because of COVID.
Right. It did change things a lot. It's been interesting that.
Yeah.
It's going to your vlog. Again, I don't watch those things, but yours, and I say yours again, symbiotic, is it just grabs your attention. And you're talking about grabbing attention of checking out the guys' raised garden beds. It's grabbing attention about the birds. I'm going, but it does do it, man. And then what was beautifully humbling so anybody listening, go to YouTube, look at Pat Mac, look at the vlog. I think you're up to
we'll be releasing actually we'll show on a live stream tomorrow night, and then it'll launch publicly probably a day or two after.
Awesome. So great reason to be in the squad. But that vlog 1 blew my mind because I get to see Pat Mac basic dude stuff, or him going crazy doing some wild exercises, which have a phenomenal concept around them, but they look crazy. But the vlog and then the showing of it, you did a video of actually the whole squad watching that vlog, and that blew my mind. The humility, the camaraderie. You could, Pat's face is like mine.
Yeah,
it shows it like that, and it was great. And it's a success, and it's due to what you guys all bring to it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And again, we'd love to be able to say we were so brilliant to plot this all out and blueprint it and all of this, but no, it was just this seizing opportunity type
Yep.
thing that happened. And it what came together was better than anything we could have planned. And because when we first started the squad, it was just videos. We would post instructional videos. I would do inspirational type videos, and I would do some business and marketing type videos. And we tiered it, as you mentioned, doing it like more like special tier 3, tier 2, tier 1, with tier 1 being the highest.
Yep.
Um, and then we just realized, okay, the community on Patreon isn't very good. Technologically, the software is not very good for commenting and seeing that someone
No,
commented. And
no.
so we created a private Facebook group so that everybody could do that. And then we added the live streams, then we added the Zoom calls, and then we started doing with the live events, the meetups and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's become something that I can't find another version of. Other people have great video and type vlog type productions, but they don't have this community element.